Hi, Tom Mullen here with Communities at Washington Times, and today I'm joined by Doug Wead, world-renowned best-selling author, world-renowned speaker, and senior campaign advisor to the Ron Paul campaign. Doug, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be with you.
Now, it hasn't been widely reported, but as of the roll call vote last night, Ron Paul actually won 3 states, isn't that right?
Yeah. If it had all happened organically, we would have won at least 11 states, maybe 12, but yeah, 3 of them snuck through there.
And I think that he's got somewhere around 200 delegate votes. I think the final total is yet to be known.
Well, there are a lot of what are called stealth delegates. That's why when you saw the A's have it and you heard this big voice response of nays, that's because many hundreds of the Romney delegates are actually Ron Paul supporters who got elected at state conventions.
And you're hoping to accomplish quite a bit on the platform with those delegates, correct?
Well, we think we did already. The platform calls for an audit of the Fed. Hey, that's what we want. It calls for taking a look at the gold standard, which is what we want. It calls for declaration of war from Congress before a president goes to war. It's what we wanted. Asks for freedom on the internet, which is something we're very vigilant about, something that we wanted. You go right down the list, we got everything we wanted on the platform committee. If that means anything to anybody, we think it does mean something when there's an ideological shift underway, and we think there is one underway.
Well, one of the criticisms I've heard of the strategy is that, yes, you may accomplish quite a bit on the platform, but nobody reads it and nobody follows it. My question is, though, with Ron Paul supporters so active in the process, and perhaps even getting together with the people from the Tea Party, will there be more pressure on Republican politicians to follow the platform going forward?
No, the pressure comes from the numbers of the public, and the platform helps shape those numbers and articulate those policies, but the numbers from the public are great. For example, 4 years ago when Rand Paul ran for president, 74% of the American people did not know what the Federal Reserve was. Today, 80% of the American people want an audit. They want some transparency so we can see how much money is being created and to whom is it being given. Which countries, which banks, which corporations. We now know that the Federal Reserve is creating money and giving it to corporations. We want to know what it is. 80%. That's what influences, not just the platform, but that did influence the platform and allowed it to get on the platform. So you're going to have Mitt Romney, even Barack Obama maybe, co-opt this issue from Dr. Paul. We doubt that there'll be a real audit, the kind we want, but it has its influence.
Now, in amassing these delegates, state by state, you have had a blog that was following each state convention. Not always an easy road for some of these people to get here to Tampa at the RNC, correct?
They experienced broken bones. In some cases, the outgoing chairman would hire off-duty policemen and say, we want to keep peace at our state convention, so I'm going to point out troublemakers. And they'd have the state convention and they'd elect a new state chairman. The outgoing state chairman would say, arrest that man. So they arrested some of our duly elected new delegates, and one case, a state chairman. One had had bones broken, his knuckles and fingers were broken. He was in police custody. Another one was dropped to the floor. He had a prosthesis, an artificial hip. You can see it online. You won't see it on NBC or CBS, but you can see it on YouTube, which is why we vigilantly protect the internet. But you can Google and research what happened. And I was very pleased that at the RNC they had this vote, yay or nay, and yays in the opinion of the chair, the yays have it. I was glad for the whole nation. They kind of, what? I was glad they could see what has been going on at the state conventions, the county conventions, and the precinct conventions. But now with the new rules, by the way, all that's over. It's all over. It will now be a party run by about 10 fat men in a room who will pick the delegates.
Well,
I know most of those men. That's why I say they're fat. They do need to lose a little weight.
Now, one clarification, too. In a lot of the news reporting, as these state conventions were going on, we'd hear, well, there was violence today at the Nebraska convention. And You know, one thing that was not made clear, it was always the Ron Paul delegate that was the victim of the violence, not the one that was breaking the fingers or throwing the punches, right?
Yeah, you notice that they didn't let the Maine delegation be seated, the Ron Paul Maine delegation. They had security escort them off the floor, and they seated a different delegation that was handpicked. And part of the reason we believe for that was Ashley Ryan. She's this lovely 21-year-old girl, innocent as she can be, very patriotic. She's the youngest person elected to the Republican National Committee. She's the National Committee woman from Maine. And during the Rules Committee fight, her pitted against John Sununu, who I worked for. He's a great guy, but he can be a bully. It didn't look good, and they didn't want her on the floor. They didn't want those Maine delegates seen on the floor, because that's the future of the Republican Party. The future of the Republican Party are Hispanics, young people, and former Democrats who are coming into the party because they've changed their mind. And that's the Ron Paul supporters. In Nevada, the rule came down: if a Hispanic approaches the microphone, turn it off, because they're a Ron Paul supporter. In Minnesota, the verbal memo came down: if they're under the age of 50, don't vote for them, because they'll be a Ron Paul delegate. But it's the young people and the Hispanics that the party needs. And if it wants them, it's going to have to pick up some of these issues that we care about.
Now, looking back into the past for a moment, you weren't always a Ron Paul supporter. In fact, you're a longtime Republican Party insider, if you will. You've worked on, what is it, 3 presidential campaigns?
7. I've been a part of 7 presidential campaigns. I started with Goldwater. I went to the Mark Hopkins Hotel in 1964, the Goldwater Convention, and then very much I loved Gerald Ford. I've had him in my home 2 or 3 times in different homes, one in Arizona and one in Missouri. And so I'm rock hard Republican, wrote Reagan's campaign biography, and worked for George Herbert Walker Bush in his White House as special assistant to the president. But I was watching the debates, and I had in my heart, I knew this Iraq war, this is a personal thing. I think
2008.
2000. No, this was 1996. I'm watching this discussion about the possibility that George Herbert Walker Bush will be the nominee, and I say to my wife, you know, if he's the nominee, darling, because I knew him well, we will go to war with Iraq, and we will kill Saddam Hussein, and we will kill his sons, because he is a son, and he knows you can't leave a son standing. He's proof of that. And when I saw the debate then, you mentioned in 2008, I thought I was the only person in the world who knew this or felt this way, and I hear Ron Paul start talking about this stuff. I didn't know who he was. I said, who is this guy? How dare he talk about these things in public? I thought I'd carry this stuff to my grave, and I heard him challenging this war in public, and that's when I started Googling Ron Paul, and I became a fan.
And you found out that you agreed with him on many of the other domestic issues as well.
I did. I thought, you know, his only problem is he supports the states to make the decision on drugs. That's his big problem. One by one, I had these problems. I'd go to him, I'd say, Dr. Paul, you can't believe this won't work. And then he'd give me his version of it. He'd say, well, Doug, he said, if we tried to get rid of tobacco by arresting kids on the street corners and going into hospitals and taking people with lung cancer and throwing them into prison and defoliating the tobacco fields of North Carolina, we'd still be smoking. That's not how you eliminate drugs, and that's not how you eliminate tobacco. And if you want to teach people good things, you're going to have to find another way, but other than making laws. And I'm on board with Ron Paul on just about every position he takes now, Tom. I'm convinced.
And now, of course, Ron Paul is retiring from politics. What's next for Doug Wead, and not only in politics, but in your other life as an author and a world-known speaker?
Well, I love history, so I'm writing these history books, and I'm in the middle of a trilogy on the children, the parents, and the siblings of the American presidents. And I finished the first 2 books. They were New York Times bestsellers. I'm working on the 3rd one to complete that trilogy and that study. Then I can die.
Is there a website that people can go to find out more about you?
Well, thank you. Yeah, DougWead.com. It's W-E-A-D, but DougWead.com.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being with me today.
Thank you, Tom.
That is Senior Campaign Advisor for the Ron Paul campaign, Doug Wead. Find out more about him at DougWead.com. This is Tom Mullen from Communities at Washington Times. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.